What's up guys, so today I'm back for another install video, and this one is going to be a bit more technical and scary than most of them because it includes cutting into your hood. So today I'm going to be installing these Track Spec Motorsports T1 hood louvers or hood vents. Not gonna lie, I'm pretty scared for this because cutting into your hood is a pretty serious thing, and like once you cut into it you can't really go back. So we're gonna kind of go with the measure twice cut once method. So I'm gonna be walking you guys through how we installed these hood louvers and giving you guys tips as we go along so you guys can learn from any mistakes that we hopefully do not make but probably will end up making. Really quick, why you would want to be installing these hood louvers and why I'm doing it myself is because these extract a lot of lift from the inside of your engine bay and also cool your engine bay a lot. One of the really big problems with the FRS when it's stock is that it has a lot of overheating issues, especially when you're running the stock radiator. And right now I'm still running the stock radiator with no oil cooler. I'm going to be installing these to help with some of the heat issues. Now these were like $330, which isn't that bad, especially when you compare it to carbon fiber vented hoods, which would be another option if you're looking for hood ventilation. The hood of the FRS is made of aluminum and it's actually really light, so you don't need to go with the carbon fiber hood, especially since unless you buy a dry carbon hood, you won't actually be getting it any lighter of a hood. You'll just get it for looks, which I mean, I'm all for looks, but I'm more for saving money, and these are a better option if you're trying to save money but still ventilate your hood. So let's get to the install. Really quick, when you're starting this install, I would definitely recommend doing it off of the car. I would definitely recommend doing it off. I'll tell you guys in a second. Alright, so I would recommend doing this install off of the car, and the reason for that is even though you could maybe do it on the car, you'd still get metal shards from the engine into the engine bay, and that's just dangerous and a bad idea. Even if you cover it with some carpeting or something like that, it still has a chance of getting in there, and also it's going to be much easier to get around the hood and cut around the hood when it's off the car. Now the way that you remove these black clips, or at least the way that we did it, is you take two flathead screwdrivers, put them in on each side of the screws, and slowly start to wiggle them out, because that way you can slowly get these prongs to start working their way out. If you do it any quicker or try to grab it with pliers, as I learned, you could break off this top part and send this black part inside of the hood, and when it's in there, it's also really hard to get it out, practically impossible, so you might have a small bit of rattle inside your hood while you're driving around, which is not optimal. So if you use the two screwdriver method, that's a way to get it out without breaking this part and putting it inside. So now we can actually get to measuring and cutting up the hood. So as you can see, we just finished setting up the templates in order to cut the hood. We did all this, and now I'm going to walk you guys through everything that we did. The next step is obviously cutting, and that's where it gets real. So this is a really important step to make sure you got all of this right. So when you buy the kit, it comes with these templates, these papers that you see right here, and they give you the points that you need to work off of in order to know where you're going to cut. So the first thing that you need to do is you need to draw a line down the center of the hood. Now obviously you don't want to do this on your actual hood. You want to put a piece of painter's tape down and then draw that line on there. We picked about 3 or 4 points down the hood to draw, to make sure that when we were drawing our line down, it was straight all the way down. After you get that, that's when you can start laying out the templates. So in the instructions that come with the hood, you'll see all the measurements, but in case you don't have this, I'll read them to you right now. So there's point A, B, C, and D on the templates, and we're going to be working with A and D because after you've aligned those, you know where the rest of them should be. So point A has to be 10 3/16 from the bottom, which means this distance is 10 3/16, and then it has to be 3 3/4 from the center line. So that's where point A is. Now there's two little dots next to where point A is. We're working with the one that's more inside the template than outside. Then next for point D, you have to make sure that that is 5 9/16 from the center line. So they are going to be staggered outward a little bit. They're not going to be parallel. You can totally expect that. And obviously, since you have this point, you can align point D with just one measurement. You don't need the measurement from how far it is from here. Those measurements work for both sides. After you put them on, put down a bunch of tape and then look at it, make sure it looks all equal. For a second, right now, I'll put up a photo of the Counter Space Garage's photo for what it should look like, so you know the ideal photo of what you should be going off of. So that's what you should have your hood look like, and after it looks all ready, this is when you can start getting to drawing down the lines and cutting out the hood. So wish me luck. So the first step to cutting into this, you're going to need to follow these lines, if you can see them, up until you find a dot. Like I said, there are two dots. There's the inner one and the outer one. You're going to be working with the inner one for this part. That's where the two lines meet up. So to start, we're going to drill a hole into each of these. There's one on each corner, so there's a total of 8. you should be using a 3/8 drill bit. I'd advise using this punch in order to make a small indent into it like this. And now you know where to go into, and that's where your drill can lock into when you drill. So you're gonna use a 3/8 drill bit to drill into those 8 holes. Now, like I was saying, you're gonna wanna use a punch to make a small insert and hole into the hood before you start cutting into it. That way, when you put the drill bit on, it doesn't start moving around and create scratches in your hood. And then the next piece of advice that I wanna give is to use a drill bit that also has a small point on it. I don't know if you guys can see how this has a small point on it, and that will help it so that this sticks into the hole that you made with the punch and does not spin around and cut into your hood, because that would look very bad. In the interest of not scratching the hood, we've laid down a couple layers of tape pretty far out so that when we use our jigsaw to cut the hood, as we're dragging it along, we won't scratch the hood. I'd also recommend double layering this tape so that you don't scratch it. One more piece of advice, make sure that all of the metal shards from the initial holes that you cut off are off of the hood, because if they're still on the hood when you lay this down, they could be pressed up against the hood and scratch it. We've taken out the centerpiece of the template and we've drawn lines outlining it so that we know exactly where we're going to be cutting. We're going to be using a jigsaw, that you can use a cutoff wheel, and if you do use the cutoff wheel, you don't have to drill these initial holes, but I would definitely recommend going with this route. I think it's just a lot easier to get better results. So this is what it should look like after you've cut the hole, pretty much identical to what it would look like with the template, but obviously with the hole there. So after this is cut, I would recommend using an angle grinder or something to grind down these edges, make them more straight, make them like pretty nice. Also use a brush to get out all the metal pieces that were chipped off. But once again, I want to emphasize the importance of having multiple layers of tape here, because you can't really see it since we put more pieces of tape, but I was definitely cutting into this level of tape so that I almost scratched the hood. I'm really hoping that I didn't. We won't really know until we lift this tape. But one more piece of advice I want to give you guys, this is probably the most important piece of advice of this install, is on the underside of this hood. As you guys can see, there are additional layers down here. Now what would happen when we were cutting into this is when the saw would cut into it, it would grip the bottom layer and it would just vibrate the hood with the saw. It would just move up and down with the jigsaw, so it did not cut. So what we did was we had one person sit under the hood with the underside of a hammer, it doesn't really matter what tool you have, and we applied pressure under the hood, adding a second level of stabilization so that it would not vibrate with the hood and would instead stay still and cut through. And that, we were struggling because you have to cut through about that much of that layer, and that's really a lot, and we could not get anywhere, and it was going to take forever just sitting here with it moving with it, and that just made it go by in like 5 seconds. So that is a huge helpful tip. So it's now the next day and we're picking up the install from here. So as you can see, we finished cutting into the hoods. We had some minor imperfections, especially when we were trying to sand down the edges to try to make them more flat and more stable, but overall it's still looking pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use flat black Rust-Oleum paint to paint the edges to make sure that this is not oxidized. Painting it is very much advised so that it does not have the opportunity to oxidize, and also using a flat back, or I guess a normal black paint would also help so that you don't see any of this white sticking through the hood vents. So it's just a nice touch. It will take a little bit of time. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lay down a layer of painter's tape to just the point that I want to paint, so that way I don't have to be very careful when I'm painting. I can just paint it, and then any excess will get onto the paint. How I'm going to do this is I lay down the hood to see about how much I want to be painting, and now I'm going to drag out some tape. And I'm going to lay it down to cover about just as much as I think I need to be painting. And now I'm going to lay the hood vent back over. And now I know that all the area that's exposed is stuff that I do want to paint and cover. So now I'm going to do the other sides and get to painting it. So the tape layer is all done and all laid out, and you triple check to make sure that it all looks good. We can get to painting. So this is what the hood looks like after we're done painting. As you can see, there's a very thin and precise black line going around it, and that's mostly because we added the tape around it, so like the paint wouldn't extend past where it's supposed to. Overall, it looks really good. I also painted the underside like you guys saw, and that's what that looks like. I'm gonna stop dragging my hood now. I also painted the insides of the parts that are still somewhat visible, meaning like these second layers. And the reason I painted these black is so when the hood vents go on, if you look inside, you won't really see this color, like because this used to be white still sticking out. I think that was just a nice touch added to it. So now we're gonna get to putting on the hood vents with the rivets, and then we should be done with the install and we can put it back in the car. This install has taken a little while, but overall, as long as the hood vents look good, I think it'll totally be worth it. So now we've installed one of the hood vents, and I'm gonna walk you guys through how to install the other one. The first step is to line it up inside the hole and make sure it's all looks good. What I mean by looks good is that there's no paint showing, like the paint that we did earlier. Make sure none of that is sticking out the edges, and just make sure to line in the hole how you want it. Because it's like a pretty tight fit into the hole, there's not a lot of room for play, so you're pretty much just putting it in, making sure there's no paint showing, and then you're all good to go. So at that point, lay down some layers of paint to make sure that it does not move, and then we're gonna start drilling. So you're gonna drill diagonals, meaning you're gonna do this one, and then that one across, and then you're going to do that one, and then this one across. It doesn't matter if you start with this side, just as long as you do diagonals, which will hold it in place, and then from there you can start doing the rest of them. And I can walk you guys through how to rivet in a second, but that's how we line this up, and this matters a lot. Make sure there's no paint showing, because once you've riveted this in, it's really hard to change it from there. So one more tip before we start drilling, I'm gonna use this tape roll, and I'm gonna put it around the hole that I'm drilling, so that way when I drill through, in case I actually go with too much force, I don't hit anything with the metal end of this drill. So this will stop me from drilling it and damaging it. Okay, ready? Mm-hmm. So now I'm gonna walk you guys through the last part of the install, which is riveting in the hood vents. So in order to do this, you're gonna need the baggie of rivets and washers that this kit comes with, and then you're gonna need a rivet gun like this one. So there are two rivets that are included in the kit. There are long ones and there are small ones. There are not a lot of long ones, so make sure that you use them scarcely, but there are a lot of smaller ones. So we decided that for this one, we need to use a long one. And the reason for that is when we drilled into the hole, the area that the rivet is gripping, there's two layers and they're pretty far apart, so we need to use the long one in order to grip them both. So in order to install the rivets, you first need to figure out which size of the rivet you're working with. And how you do that is you take the longer, thinner end of the rivets and you test them inside each of the holes of these and see which one it fits in. So obviously I've already installed it into this part, so it slides in and it fits in just right. So the next step is take a washer from inside the baggie. And it helps a lot if you have a second person to help you. So I'm gonna hand this off to my helper. Take the long part, install it into the riveter while it's all completely open. And then take the end of it that you're going to be installing, put it through the hole that you've drilled, and then you put the washer on the other side of the rivet, and then you get the okay from the person you're working with. Okay, and while you and the person helping you are pushed tightly against it, grip the rivet gun, squeeze the end, and then squeeze the end again. And if you're using the long ones, it should take about 3 presses. If you're using the short one, it would take about 2. After you're done, make sure that you don't lose this end that comes off of it. One, you need to make sure it comes out of the rivet gun so you can use the next rivet. And 2, this is a perfect thing to puncture your tire, so definitely get this out of your garage. And the last thing is that once this clicks, like the banging noise that you guys heard, it breaks loose of the rivet and it's now just free. And the thing is, when you're riveting, you're applying a lot of pressure, so make sure that when it breaks free, you're not applying pressure and you let it go and it scrapes your hood, because I've done that twice. So that's how you install the rivets, and that's pretty much how you finish this install. So we're all done with the install, and this is what the final product looks like. It looks honestly amazing. I think it adds such a nice contrast to the rest of the car, especially with the darker colors of the splitter and the canards. To be honest, I think this honestly looks a lot better than the carbon fiber hood that I was talking to you guys about earlier, and it's a lot cheaper, and it's functional. So honestly, I think it has the best of every world. Huge shout out to Track Spec Motorsports, because this is a really cool product, and I think it's really nice and a good option for people who want to get that engine cooling and reduce the in-engine lift, but also don't want to spend a lot of money. That's going to do it for this install video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys have any questions, per usual, leave it down in the comments below, and I'll get back to it as soon as I can. Make sure you guys subscribe, follow me on Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter. I'll be at the track this weekend to test this stuff out. I don't have any gauges and stuff to see how much it will reduce engine temperatures, but I can tell you guys how the car feels. There is also a lot of new things on the car, so I'm going to be testing this thing out to feel how it feels. The last time I was at the track was at Streets of Willow, and that was a really fun track, but this is Fontana Auto Club Speedway, and that is like a much more intense track, so it'll really push this car to the limits. So if you guys want to see that video, make sure you guys pay attention to the channel and hit that notification button, because I always really appreciate that stuff. I'll see you guys next time. So strong enough.